Before the war, the world moved slowly, not because it was peaceful, but because people believed it would always exist. Cities rose stone by stone, shaped by generations who never imagined collapse. Roads stretched across valleys and hills, connecting markets, families, and distant cultures. Merchants traveled familiar routes. Farmers followed the same seasons their ancestors had trusted for centuries. Life felt permanent. Morning bells marked the start of labor. Evenings gathered families around firelight and routine. Children learned not from books, but from repetition, watching, copying, becoming. The world did not feel fragile. It felt established. Yet history does not announce itself with thunder. Change rarely begins with battle. It begins quietly. Far from the streets and homes of ordinary people, conversations were taking place. Inside halls built for authority, choices were weighed not in lives, but in advantage. Power accumulated slowly. Ambition disguised itself as necessity, and borders that once meant little began to harden. Land became something to claim. Influence became something to defend. What had once connected societies began to divide them. Rumors traveled before armies ever moved. Messengers crossed territories carrying sealed words whose meaning few understood. Markets felt the shift before soldiers did. Laughter grew cautious. Trust thinned. People sensed something approaching, though no one could name it. When the proclamations finally arrived, they felt inevitable, not sudden, just overdue. Men were summoned from fields and workshops. Some answered with loyalty, others with fear, many with resignation. Families gathered in doorways, holding conversations that required no sound. No promise felt honest enough. No farewell felt complete. On the morning of departure, city gates opened wide. Footsteps echoed across stone streets. Simple weapons were pressed into unfamiliar hands. Armor felt heavier than expected. There was no celebration, only long glances, and the quiet understanding that life had already begun to change. As the columns marched away, dust rising behind them, the world they left did not know it was being seen for the last time. Because wars do not begin on the battlefield. They begin the moment people believe their world cannot end. The march began before the sun fully rose. A pale light hovered above the land as lines of men moved forward, their steps measured, their voices absent. Each footfall pressed uncertainty deeper into the soil. There were no songs to steady the nerves, no speeches to promise glory, only the sound of leather, metal, and breath. As distance grew between the soldiers and their homes, the world behind them felt increasingly unreal. Ahead lay open land, quiet, vast, and waiting. Days passed beneath shifting skies. Nights were spent beside weak fires, surrounded by silence heavy with thought. No one spoke of fear, but it walked among them. When the first enemy banners appeared on the horizon, movement slowed instinctively. No command was needed. Every man understood the meaning of that distant shape. This was no longer preparation. It was arrival. The space between the two forces closed slowly, each step narrowing the last moments of certainty. Hands tightened around shields. Breath shortened. Time itself seemed to hesitate. Then the distance vanished. Wood slammed against wood. Metal shrieked as it met resistance. Shouts broke the silence in fractured bursts. Formation collapsed almost instantly. What had looked organized from afar dissolved into confusion. Men stumbled. Others surged forward without direction. Dust swallowed vision. Noise drowned reason. The battlefield became a place without edges. There was no grand strategy now, only instinct. Some fought desperately, some froze completely, and some fell without ever understanding how. The ground darkened beneath their feet, absorbing more than blood. Hours passed unnoticed. When the light finally softened, the sounds of combat thinned, not because peace had arrived, but because strength had vanished. Bodies lay scattered across the field, weapons abandoned where hands could no longer hold them. The wind moved gently through what remained. The first battle had ended, and with it, the final illusion. War was not heroic. It was consuming. The war did not remain on the battlefield. It spread. News of destruction traveled faster than the armies themselves, carried by survivors, whispers, and fear. Villages emptied overnight. Doors were left open. Fires burned out without being relit. People fled before they understood why. When the armies approached the great cities, the gates closed in desperation. Stone walls rose as symbols of safety, but safety was already slipping away. Refugees gathered outside the entrances, faces hollow from hunger and exhaustion. Some were allowed inside. Many were not. Inside the walls, tension grew heavier each day. Food was counted, water was guarded. Trust dissolved quietly. The siege began without ceremony. Days passed under constant waiting. Weeks followed beneath the same sky. Hunger arrived slowly, then all at once. Markets fell silent. Animals vanished from the streets. Even hope became something rationed. When the defenses finally failed, there was no dramatic turning point, only collapse. The fighting poured into narrow streets and crowded homes. Fire spread faster than reason. Families ran in every direction, searching for shelter that no longer existed. The city, once a promise of protection, became a maze of panic. Night painted the sky red. By morning, the shape of life was unrecognizable. Temples stood cracked and empty. Homes collapsed into ash and memory. The war had crossed a line. It was no longer about territory, no longer about victory. It had become something far more dangerous, a force consuming everything in its path, without distinction, without mercy. When the fighting ended, peace did not return. What followed was worse. The cities stood broken, but the world kept falling apart. Without order, fear ruled. Without leadership, chaos spread. Food vanished first. Markets closed. Storehouses were empty. The weak began to disappear quietly. Bodies lay where they fell, left behind by those still searching for survival. The roads filled with wandering souls, people with no home, no destination, no future. Some walked for days without speaking. Others collapsed along the way. Illness followed hunger. Hunger followed despair. Those who once fought side by side now fought over scraps. Neighbors turned against neighbors. The rules that had guided life for generations meant nothing anymore. Even soldiers were no longer soldiers. Without banners or commands, they drifted like ghosts, carrying weapons that no longer had purpose. Nature began to move back in. Fields went wild, animals returned cautiously. The silence grew heavier with each passing day, and slowly, the sound of humanity faded. What remained was not victory, only absence. Time did what war could not. It erased. Days passed without meaning, then weeks, then seasons. Rain washed the blood from the stones. Wind carried dust through empty streets. Weapons rusted where they fell. Banners dissolved into fabric and memory. Homes collapsed slowly, not with violence, but with neglect. Grass grew through cracks in the roads. Vines climbed the walls of once proud buildings. The world was not angry anymore. It was indifferent. Animals crossed plazas that once overflowed with voices. Birds nested where prayers had once been spoken. The past remained, but only as shape and shadow. What had been powerful became fragile. What had seemed eternal proved temporary. The silence was no longer frightening. It was complete, and in that stillness, the weight of what was lost became clear. Civilizations do not fall in a single moment. They fade, quietly, patiently, until one day, no one remembers how they once lived. What remained was not ruins alone. It was meaning. Every broken wall told a story. Every fallen stone carried a choice once made. Power had vanished. Titles had dissolved. Names no longer mattered. Thrones stood empty, unclaimed and forgotten. Maps lost their purpose. Borders faded into dirt and grass. The symbols that once commanded loyalty now commanded nothing. The world had moved beyond them. In the silence, a single truth emerged. Civilizations are not destroyed by enemies alone, but by the belief that they cannot fall. What survives is never the crown, nor the banner, nor the fortress. What survives is the lesson. That time watches patiently. That nature waits calmly. And when humanity forgets its limits, history gently reminds it. Not with anger, not with mercy, but with inevitability. Somewhere among the ruins, a witness remained. Not a hero, not a conqueror, just someone who endured. He walked through what once was home, not searching for answers, only understanding. The world no longer asked anything of him. There were no orders to follow, no flags to defend, only distance. With each step, the past grew quieter. The cities behind him crumbled further into memory. The roads ahead offered nothing but uncertainty. And yet, he continued, because movement itself had become meaning. He stood before landscapes, untouched by voices, watching clouds pass where armies once marched. In that silence, something became clear. Humanity is brief, but its consequences are not. Every choice leaves a mark. Every era leaves a scar, even when no one remains to remember. The world does not mourn civilizations. It absorbs them and moves on. The world did not rebuild itself. It transformed. What once demanded attention now existed only as background. Power lost its voice. Glory lost its echo. The storms came and passed. The sun rose and fell, and nothing waited to be remembered. The survivor understood this without words. Some histories are not meant to continue, only to conclude. He saw symbols collapse, not with drama, but with dignity. The crown in the dust, the gate left open, the silence where commands once ruled. There was no anger left in him, no grief strong enough to hold, only acceptance, because the end of one world is never the end of all things. Life does not need empires. It only needs time. And time, endlessly patient, kept moving forward. At the edge of what remained, the world stood still. No voices followed, no footsteps echoed behind. Only wind, only sky. The ruins no longer felt heavy. They simply existed. The survivor paused one last time, not to look back, but to let go. History had finished speaking. Ahead, the land stretched wide and empty, untouched by memory. No names waited to be carved, no victories to record, just earth and time. As the final light faded, the world returned to itself. Unburdened, unwatched, civilizations had risen, they had fallen, and the earth endured. If this story made you reflect, if it made you feel the weight of history, then the past has done its job. History is not just something we study, it's something we inherit. If you enjoyed this journey through time, leave a like. It helps this channel continue bringing forgotten worlds back to life. Subscribe if you want to witness more moments that shaped humanity and changed it forever. And tell us in the comments, which historical battle should we explore next? Your suggestion may become the next chapter we bring back from the past. Until then, keep watching history so we can better understand the present.